So welcome to the Global Discussion, discussions with creatives, leaders and thinkers. I'm delighted to be joined today by Alan Hennessy, the digital mentor. Alan, you're very welcome to the podcast. And let's begin by asking you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey and a little bit about all the great things that you're involved in. So over to you, Alan.
Thank you, Simon. It's a pleasure to be here and an honor as well. My name is Alan Hennessy, the digital mentor, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. I help people to navigate the digital landscape. So I'm a digital marketing consultant, trainer, and mentor, and also recently a best-selling author of my new book as well. So I'm really delighted with that. It's another string to the bow, as they say.
Well, you do an awful lot in terms of podcasting yourself. I know you do broadcast on radio, you have the book, you're training companies, and you're helping people in this ever expanding digital landscape. So you've obviously seen a lot of change, maybe post pandemic, or whether it's just change in general. We're on the advent of the AI tools getting bigger and stronger. So what's your current viewpoint from where you look at it, Alan? What are people struggling with today? What do you find yourself helping people with as the digital mentor?
Well, I think, as you say, we've had the pandemic, and that was a huge curveball that threw a lot of people out of sync, and they sort of had to think digitally. So, it was great in the sense for us, and in that respect of business wise, it was fantastic. But I think especially over the last 2 years, I've noticed that there's been a huge turning point with regards to engagement and with developing relationships online. And I think that is a key important part, because as much as we've thrown content out left, right, and center, and we promote ourselves in so many different ways, I think it comes back to engagement, and it's about connecting with, I suppose, with customers, clients, collaborators, whatever it is, influencers that you're in the market to do. So I think that's a huge, huge part, especially digital over the last 2 years. But like, as you say, we're in the advent of AI, and I think this is so exciting. It really is. It's so exciting. Now, I've listened to both arguments that, oh, it'll take jobs away, but I think it's just going to really enhance what we do. It's going to help us, and I think where we've got to look at the types of, say, AI it's another tool to use, because at the end of the day, and I've spoke to many, many digital marketers over the years, and one stands out in particular is Brian Kramer, and he has this movement of H to H, human to human. And I think that's what it is. And I think all of these AI tools, as much as they're fantastic and they can do so much for us and they can help us so much, it still has to have that human input, and it still has to have that human touch. And I think that's the key important part to remember with this. So it's we can never be replaced by machines. They can help us to develop. But I think that at the end of the day, that the AI is going to be an added benefit to a lot of people in respect of what they do, and help them to be more creative. But we did a number of research projects on it over the last couple of months in regard to it. And the thing that kept coming back is the emotional connection that was missing. It was giving us great content. It was giving us fantastic content to deliver and to tweak, but it just missed on that human connection and that emotional connection. So I think that's where it has to be sort of as a guide, use it as a guide more so than anything.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent point, because some people are fearful, some people are really excited, and then there's everybody else sort of somewhere in between. And of course, there's a large segment have no idea what we're talking about. But
yeah,
in terms of the in terms of the collaboration and a collaborative approach to using it as a tool or another tool in that marketing tech stack, I certainly buy into that ethos. But the other thing you've mentioned, two other things that you've mentioned is about the human side, whether it's human to human or just that human engagement
Mm.
and that sort of, that emotional cut through. And you mentioned your book at the top, so I'm going to bring it up, Alan, because your new book, Solving the Digital Marketing Jigsaw Puzzle. It does feel like we've got a jigsaw puzzle at this moment in time. So the title and the timing couldn't be any better.
Mm.
So could you maybe unpack the book a little bit more and just help our listeners around the world understand what the book's about and how you're helping people solve this jigsaw puzzle that is this digital marketing world?
Yeah, and that's exactly, and that was the reason for the title is because I sort of when I started thinking about this, obviously I train and I teach people and I mentor, people that business people, um, and small business owners like that. I like, and they all come back and say, "Oh, I just don't understand the different concepts and how they all mix together and how they come together." So I says, "Okay, well, really, what it is it is a jigsaw puzzle, and you can see this fantastic image on the front of a jigsaw puzzle, but when you open up the box, there's 1,001 pieces or 1,000 pieces of whatever it is inside, and you have to put it together." So really the basis of why I wrote the book is to help people to get them into the mindset of digital marketing, that it doesn't have to be as complex as what people think it is. A lot of people say, "Oh, there's so much in this, I don't know where to start." I always go back to the same scenario of, start with where your customers are, and that's where you work, that's where you can do that. But the whole idea of the book is to write it in such a way that you build on each chapter. Each chapter helps you. You really, it's not a case of a book of where you can jump into chapter 10 and say, yes. After reading it, yes, you can. But the idea really behind it is that when you start to read the book is it's building blocks. So it's it's the concept, it's the mindset, it's the branding, it's all these different aspects. And I try to explain it in simple English. So it's not, you know, full of acronyms, or it's full of, like, really, I have to do this and I need to buy this piece of software. It's the simplicity of it. So it's really trying to break it down and help people understand of the process that they need to go. And the great thing about it, and the reason, and one of the great aspects of this book is if you're reading it for the first time and you're new to digital, it's going to help you. It's going to give you that insight to be able to move to the next, the next phase of your career, of your campaigns or whatever it may be. But the great thing about it is you can go back and use this book for individual campaigns, and that's the key to it. So it's a two-dimensional book in a sense, in that respect of it. But there's so much content in it. I've really tried to simplify it in regards to even like simple things like SEO and keyword research and what platforms do what and how they do it, then the type of content and how you should develop that content. There's a number of case studies in there, from really, really, from small businesses right up to corporate entities and stuff like that. So, and there's bonus content, there's downloads in the book and everything that you can use. There's even a mini course at the end of it as well. So there's a huge amount of information in there that will help people. And and I love to hear it's working. And I have people that have come back and said, I've actually started to implement a lot of the the topics that you talk about in this. So it's been a real, labor of love as much as anything else. But and I'm like you, Simon, I write a lot of blog posts, and I started writing this book. I sort of went to myself, oh, hold on, I can expand on this even more, and I can expand on this again even more. So it's a great way, it's a great opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and of course you're bringing a lot of expertise to it and a lot of
Mm.
time that you've invested in this area of digital marketing. So on one hand, it sounds like it's a toolkit, people who need to get started, that maybe are a little bit confused by the jigsaw puzzle that they've opened. They've got those 1,000 pieces in front of them. But it also seems like a reference book that you could go back to or apply to a specific campaign. And I do like the fact, Alan, that it's very um, non-jargony in terms of you break it
Mm.
down so people understand why you're doing something in a particular way. So continued success with that. But of course, the media empire of the digital mentor doesn't stop there, because you're also a very successful podcaster in your own right. And I mentioned that, at the top, that you're involved in radio, you're involved in podcasts of your own, and I know you do communities where you bring people together on a regular basis. So could you maybe share a little bit about that and why that's important and why you do those things? Because you have a great online community too.
Mm. I'm a firm believer in is that we all have something to bring to the table. And I think it's very important because a lot of people have sometimes it's one dimensional, whereas what I like to try and do, especially with the podcast, is it's a platform to be able to deliver content that's relevant, but also to bring in other content creators, other digital marketers, and share their experience. Because I think we all learn from each other. And, someone who says they know everything really probably knows nothing. So what I always say is like we're always learning. And I've learned so much from all of the digital marketers that I've I've been on the podcast with and brought on, and we've talked and we've chatted and stuff like that. And it's been developed into great relationships beyond that. But I'm a firm believer in is that everyone has their own audience, and having their own audience gives you an opportunity to be able to showcase other people's work as much as your own, because I think there's enough for everyone to go around. And I really believe that the more we work together and we collaborate, the better it becomes, the easier it becomes for people to learn from us, but also to learn about us. And then I suppose with the global tea break was a really, really, it was, I tell you how it started. I was actually sitting at home and I worked from a box room. And as a lot of people will probably listen to this and probably say, yeah, I know what that feels like. And the walls were closing in on me one day. So I just put out on Twitter, would anyone like to have a virtual cup of tea? Because we're from Ireland, we drink a lot of tea. So instead of the coffee break, it was a tea break. And a good friend of mine in the States actually came on and he says, yeah, I'll jump on a call with you. And we jumped on a Zoom and I said, this is fantastic. So he says, let's open this up to the world and see how it goes. 4 years later, we have a huge, strong community of entrepreneurs, business owners, authors, trainers, you name it, there's in there. And it's all walks of life. And it has been great because everyone has learned from each other's experience. And I'm a firm believer, like, especially with the global tea break, I know we sort of said, we started it and we're the co-founders of it, but we don't own it. I'm a firm believer in is that the community owns it. So it's as much as everyone puts into it. So there's no one sort of saying, oh, well, you can't do this. There is obviously moderators and stuff like that to keep it on track. But at the end of the day, no one person owns it. We all own it. And that's the whole idea. And it's free. And I'm a firm believer in that, you know, it's a great way to expand your network. And I believe community is the key in everything that we do.
And I love that. I love the fact that I can't believe it's gone 4 years. So that took me by surprise, because it only seems like yesterday. But to start off by just putting something out there and saying, does anybody fancy this virtual cup of tea with me? And now you have this international community online that meet on a regular basis,
Yeah.
that are all learning, helping, sharing information. I mean, it is incredible when you think about it.
Yeah. And the great thing about it is it's global. Like we have people who come in from the States, we have people come in from the UK, we have people from Hong Kong, we have people from New Zealand. There's people get up in the middle of the night to actually do this. And then there's others in Australia, South Africa. So it's global, and it's amazing because what you also learn as well, Simon, is different aspects of life and how different nationalities talk and speak and connect, and how they engage with each other. And we learn so much from that because it's a great insight for, I suppose, as well, for delivering content. when you're putting it out online, that you understand how someone else thinks or what will work best for them. So that's where it gives you a great opportunity. They're the underlying things that people don't realize, but actually, I suppose they're subconsciously, they're in the back of people's minds, that we go, oh, hold on, that doesn't work with people from South Africa, or that doesn't work with someone from Ireland, so there's a great ways of learning, and it goes deeper and deeper every time.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that cultural understanding and
Mm,
having your finger on the pulse of that global network is to the benefit of not only everything that you put out, but it's also a benefit to all your clients, and it's benefit to everybody who's involved. So
mm,
I think, as this planet shrinks because of the digital tools that we have, it's a good thing because we can get those different views and opinions from all across the world. And
yeah.
whether it's audio or video or blogs that you mentioned, or whether it's the new book, it's all available to be reached from and more of an international audience. So
Mm.
that's great.
And as I always say, it's a good friend of mine, Howard Hughes, always says, geography is history, and it really is. We can be anywhere in the world that we want to be now, so it's a great opportunity to do this.
Yeah, no, 100%. Well, look, I want to change gear a little bit, and I want to ask you a few questions if I can.
Oh,
So I'd
okay.
like to ask you about, obviously, somebody who's written a book, but I'd like to ask my guests what kind of things they read themselves. So are they constantly scouring the internet? Are they on social media? Do they listen to a lot of podcasts? Do they pick up a physical book? Is there a particular genre or author? And what are your learning styles like? So how does that work in your world?
Yeah, well, I'm always hungry to learn something new, and it can be, there's so many different things that my brain always, because I believe that you're constantly learning. I suppose at the moment, well, probably one of my favorite authors is Mark Schaefer, and he's a good friend, but his books are just incredible, and I'm currently reading his new book, and I was actually only talking to him only a couple of days back, and I actually said to him, I said, I've just ordered your back catalogue of books, and he went, oh, well, that's great. So, but I says, I've heard the audiobooks, I've listened to the audiobooks, and now I'm actually getting the physical copies of reading them. But I also would read a lot about human behavior and that type of how the mind works, and I find that very fascinating. So I'm constantly reading and trying to understand people better and help them. I have a master's in NLP, which is neuro linguistic programming, but so that helps me a lot to understand how I can develop content, or help people to further their careers through these type of processes. So I'm constantly reading, and I've have a number of podcasts that I listen to. I have a few guilty pleasures as well, but we'll move on from there. But let's just say I do like a bit of Tommy and Hector. I think their podcast is fantastic, and it's a great escape as well. So, but a lot of business podcasts I would listen to, as well.
That's great. Yeah. And you mentioned Mark Schaefer, of course, who is well known in
Mm,
these circles. And I've actually, I'm about halfway through his new book, Belonging to the Brand, at the time of
mm,
recording this. But it's interesting that you mentioned Mark, because we were just talking about community. And the big point in Mark's latest book is that community is basically the ultimate marketing strategy.
yeah, totally.
Uh, yeah,
Totally.
I mean, spot on compared to what we were talking about earlier, and your
You know,
global tea break, your international community. And there's Mark's latest book called Belonging to the Brand. And he really zones in on the
mm,
importance of community, doesn't he?
yeah, it is. And, and it's so true. Like, when we think about community, we've got to, so the misconception of people think is that community is the people that live in your vicinity, within your street, or your town, or whatever it is. But community is so much more. There's so many different branches of community that we can develop, that we can really engage with. And I think it's so important. about building a community. As much as you build your brand, you must build your community, because your community are the people that are going to advocate for you, are going to help others learn more about you. So your community is a huge, huge part of one of any marketing strategy. But it's also going back to, again, what I say, it's human to human. It's interaction. It's getting out and, you know, we spent 2 years sitting behind computers on Zoom calls. And at the time it was great, and yeah, it worked. But I think people want to be able to go back out and talk to people. And that's about building that community again, and going to and pushing yourself to go out and meet new people and find out what they do. You know, don't I always say to people, don't go up and ask a question, you know, when you get introduced, oh, I do this and I do that. Ask them. You know, there's I think the greatest question you can ask is what's going on in your world? When you ask that question, it just opens up and you learn so much, you know, and that's the beauty of these type of things.
Couldn't agree more. So the other thing I wanted to ask you then, as we think about community and we think about human to human again, you must have you've obviously met, spoke to, interviewed, helped lots of humans along your journey. But the question I've got for you is about people that have inspired you, people that you learn from. You mentioned Mark Schaefer, but I'm just wondering, does that take you straight back to your childhood? Is it somebody you bumped into last week? But when I ask you, who do you admire? Who's inspired you? What kind of people or character traits springs to mind, Alan?
I think, you know, I love innovators. I think people who are innovative and people who speak their truth, that don't, you know, try and gloss over things, that they just say that sometimes, you know, and sometimes the simplest of things are probably the most profound, you know. And I admire, there's a number of people. Simon Sinek would be one, Ken Robinson would be another one. You know, it's people that just get it. And when you listen, you sort of say to yourself, hold on, you know, I'm listening to Stephen Bartlett's podcast, and he has interviewed some incredible people from every walk of life. But it's just listening and understanding. And I think, you know, I suppose if there was people that I would probably admire and who have influenced me, definitely Mark would be one. Jay Bear would be another, Simon Sinek, and even people closer to home that I work with individually. And they're not big names, but what they say is inspiring, and what they do is inspiring, and how they help others, that make me go, yeah, that's the type of person that I want to be. And that's the person that I've always tried to, you know, project as who I am. It's personal, it's friendship, it's help, it's being there to be able to support others. And I think that's the key important part of what I do, both personally and professionally. I think it's so important because you want people to be able to not be afraid to ask, you know, a silly question or something that doesn't, you know, that others would be afraid to ask. And one of the things I always say, even when I'm doing training courses, there's no such thing as a silly question, because probably the person next to you is the person that wants to ask that questions but too embarrassed to. So just ask it, and we get it out in the open and we can explain it. So, you know, they're the type of things. But yeah,
That's great. That's great. And I suppose in that vein of helping people, then you obviously help with advice and you advise a lot of people. But I wanted to ask you about the best advice that you've ever received. So, has there been any particular advice that has stuck with you? That advice where you go, I wish somebody had told me that earlier, or just a really good piece of advice that you has really carried you through and helped you through life. And or is there any sort of advice that you find yourself repeating to people that you think is good to share with us here today?
I think probably my biggest piece of advice is that I've ever received is to stop and listen to the person that's talking to you. Listen, and listen intently. Don't be thinking, oh, well, I have to be here in a half an hour or whatever. Tune in to that person and listen to what they're saying, and listen to their tone, and listen to the context of what they're talking about, and be interested. I think Dale Carnegie says to be interested, you need to be interesting. So I think that's the key. So I think my I suppose my thing that I would always go back to is and the advice that I've always got is to be nice and be human and help people, because I think when you help people it comes back. You'll get others, yeah, oh, you're giving way too much time away for for free and whatever, and I say no, because it comes back to you. you know it does come back. And I've learned it over the last 15 years of a very successful digital marketing agency that we work with a lot of clients. I've a lot of clients that I mentor and help, and they haven't gone away. They keep coming back because it's that personalization that you're putting into it. Now I know, look, every business you can't be personal to everyone, but you can be human and you can be talk to the person. That type of, and I think that's the key that I really, really think is important to do.
Yeah, and I think that the point that you make about actually really listening to somebody, it's such a basic quality, but it's such a vital quality, particularly in this noisy, busy digital world that
Mm.
we live in. To actually hear somebody and to actually listen and to understand, I think is a real strength. It's back to that human connection that you were talking about earlier, Alan.
Sometimes, Simon, it's the simplest of things. It's like when I talk about digital marketing, people say, what do I do? How do I do? And I'm going, simplify it. If you can simplify processes, it helps you to understand and helps you to get a better fit. Because once we get overwhelmed, we tend to run from it. We run away from it. Whereas if we actually just stand back from it and go, okay, here's what we're going to do. This is the way we're going to do it. And I think that is much as anything is simplifying processes that you understand, that because they'll develop over time. And they're key important, things that I would say, if people take nothing away from the conversation today, is to simplify things when you're talking to a person or when you're trying to figure out something yourself. Keep pulling it back, pulling it back all the time. Once you start doing that, you start to see how simple it actually is and how not as daunting as what the task may be, you know.
I like that. Removing the complexity from something and actually
Mm,
getting down to the
totally.
brass tacks, the clarity. Yeah, very much
Mm.
so. So as we look ahead, as you plan the next month, the next 6 months, the next 12 months, what does that year look like for you? Do you plan ahead that far further? Do you do week to week? How does the planning work for you? And what are you hoping to achieve over the next 6 to 12 months, Alan?
Well, I do plan. I do have a structured plan that I try and do. Like last year was to write the book. This year is, and even last year writing the book, I ended up having to develop a whole brand, a whole new brand and everything around the digital mentor around. So that was quite a big feat. So, but from doing that last year, it's taught me how to self-publish a book. It's taught me how to, you know, build a personal brand as much as anything. So while I was doing that, I was very strategic. I started know documenting all this. So that's one of the things I'm going to be developing this year is a marketing course for building your own brand. That's one. The other is I've just I've just launched a new digital mentor podcast. So I'm going to be working on that, and that's going to be great. I'm really looking forward and excited about that. And I'm also planning on writing another book this year. So loads going on. But I suppose, yeah, I would firm believer in that you have to have some sort of plan or structure for your year. It doesn't, don't, what I try and say to people is don't try and make it that so it's unattainable, within reason, understand it. I know what I can do. I know what time I can dedicate to it. And then I start to structure. And then what I do is I break it down month by month. And I say, okay, in this month, I'm going to achieve such and such. And that's how I sort of have always worked. And I think that's what my plan is now for the next year, and also to really to start to develop the digital mentoring, and also the training element of what I do, because I know that people would benefit from it.
And one of the things that strikes me when you're talking there, Alan, is it's almost as though you remove the overwhelm from it. I'm sure there's a lot of hard work behind the
Mm,
scenes that nobody sees, but the way you've described it there is it's quite methodical, quite planned out, quite strategic in one sense, but also not overly complex that it becomes this overwhelming to-do list. That's how it's coming across to me. It seems
mm.
very measured and very thought through.
I think of in anything that I do or anything that I share online, what I always think about is if I was reading this, or if I was looking to start this, how would I do it? And I ask the questions that that person would ask first. And that's how I work a system, because I believe that's the way to, like, because I know when I was, you know, going back to years ago when I was in school and stuff like that, you would be taught through textbooks, you'd be taught this is how you do it. And that's great. And it gives you the fundamentals, and it gives you the basic, understanding of what it is. But as I've grown older, and when I started off the business, there wasn't people around that I could turn to, that I could say, how do you do this? Or could you give me some advice on this? So that's why I simplify things now, because I say to myself, because if someone rings me or someone asks a question, they're not going to be afraid to ask that question. And they know that there's someone that's going to be able to talk to them and help them to understand it. And I'm very, very, as you say, methodical about that in what I do. I don't believe in overwhelming things, because when you overwhelm things, as I said earlier, you run away from them. So the less overwhelming it is, the easier it is to actually to achieve the goal, or the objective of what you're going to do.
Well, look, it sounds very exciting. Anybody who takes on a new book in a new year is always adventurous and has courage. Of course, you've got the new Digital Mentor podcast that you mentioned. You've got the current book, which is brand new, which I'm sure you're out promoting and sharing. You've got
Mm,
the successful agency. You've got all the consultancy work and the training. You also mentioned, I think you're putting a digital course together as well this year on personal branding. So
mm.
sounds like an interesting year ahead, Alan.
It is, yeah, yeah. It's a lot of work, but it's great. As you know, I always say it, Simon, when you do something you love, you never work a day in your life. And I do it. I get such a buzz off it when I see people learning, and I see people, benefiting from what I do. And, at the end of the day, that's what we're here for. We're here to help each other, and here to, you know, hopefully at the end of the day as well, make a few quid as well along the way. But it's what you do. It's, if you have passion in what you do, you'll always enjoy it. And I think that's the key to it. You know?
Yeah, I like that. And look, before we wrap up today, Alan, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to bring to our international audience? Or if people want to get involved in the global tea break community, or find out more about the book or the podcast or all the things that you're involved in, where are you sending people to?
Yeah, well, the if you're looking for social media management and consultancy, stuff like that, it's Compass Media. That's Compass with a K, compassmedia.ie. But if you are more interested in the training and the mentorship programs and the book and all that good stuff and the podcast, you can go to the digitalmentor.ie. You'll find out all the details there. And please reach out and connect with me across all of the social media platforms. My two favorites, as Simon knows, are LinkedIn and Twitter. So you'll always find me there, either on one or the other. But LinkedIn is probably my main social platform. It's the one that I really enjoy, and I spend most of the time there. So reach out and connect with me. I would be delighted to have a chat with you. And make sure that you let me know you heard me here on the podcast as well. And if you want to buy the book, it's available on the website, but also on Amazon in paperback and also in Kindle. And the Audible version is coming soon.
Very good. Are you going to read it yourself, or do you have a voice actor, or how's it going to work on the Audible, Alan?
I think I'm going to read it myself, because I know when I listen to Audible books, when I hear the author's tone, I know, because, I connect with it, because if you get, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it's wrong to have a voiceover person doing it, but they don't get the same feeling as you do from the author's point of view, because we're passionate about it, what we talk about, and we explain it in our language type of thing and our tone. So I think that's good. So yeah, that's going to happen somewhere along the line over the next year. Don't know when.
Well, that's
We'll,
from
I'm sure I'll find an hour or two in the middle of the night to do that.
Yeah, I'd probably book in more than an hour or two. Anybody who I've spoken to has recorded their own audio for their own book. It's a big project, but
It's a huge
continued
project.
success. Yeah,
It is a huge project, but look, we'll get there.
we will. Listen, and that brings us nicely to the end of this episode. So thanks very much to Alan for joining us. Thanks to everybody for watching or listening around the world. Please like, follow, subscribe, do all the things I need you to do to help support this podcast. And I hope that you'll join me back here for some more discussions with creatives, leaders, and thinkers. So thank you, Alan. It's been a pleasure to catch up with you.
Thank you, Simon.